You're listening to a Frequency Podcast Network production.
Marc Vautour is the 1%. He made his fortune in oil and cryptocurrency. He's handsome, charming, and has a heart of gold. It's hard to believe he's still single, only it isn't, because Marc isn't real. He's a serial grifter and romance con artist who's tricked women and men across Canada, the US, Vietnam, and the Czech Republic out of over $1 million. And that's just what we know of. His trail of destruction has led to heartbreak, bankruptcies, foreclosures, and even PTSD.
How could you not be a psychopath? How could you ruin so many people's lives and not care and walk away? It's dark evil.
Romance fraud, business fraud, investment fraud, medical fraud.
You know, they say a really good liar puts some truths in there to make it easier and make the story more believable, because he has conviction about that because he knows it's true.
He goes by Marcel. He goes by Mark with an M-A-R-C and M-A-R-K. He goes by André. He also goes by Dre. We know him to go by Andy. We know him to go by Martin. We know him to go by March. I think he has a character that he's built for each one of them.
He doesn't work. This is his job. He is good at what he does. Say, you know what? Bravo. You're good at what you do. But we're good at what we do too. And we're going to get you.
In episode 4, you heard about how Kym, Jodi, and Andréa joined forces and began investigating Marcel's past. They learned that his cons go way beyond romance. They now know he also preys on women, men, new immigrants, the elderly, anyone who's vulnerable. In early 2019, Kym and Jodi continued to compile evidence against Marcel and find out more about his criminal activity. And in March, which is also Anti-Fraud Month, Andréa launches a tip line to find other victims called Stop the March Madness. She knows the only way to catch Marcel is strength in numbers, and by keeping a meticulous record of his crimes. Before long, Andréa gets a hit.
Someone reached out to us in May of 2019 saying that she had been with André for the past few months, traveling from Ontario to BC.
You know, I ended up in Victoria finally at the hostel, and I was just thinking about all those stuffs, and I was like, okay, maybe he's a con man, or, you know, and then I was like, no, Nicola, don't be paranoid. It cannot be like gang, you know, organized group against you. I was like, Nicola, you're not living in a detective stories.
Chapter 5. Catch him if you can.
My name is Nicola. I'm from Czech Republic, and I'm a barista right now.
She's now in her early 30s.
But I was 28 when I met Marc.
Nicola is a self-proclaimed introvert, but you wouldn't know it from her life story. After college, where she studied film and theater, she wanted to get out of her small town and travel the world.
I've been to Asia, like Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. Also, like I was traveling around Europe a little bit, just trying to get more experience. And I was also interested to go to Canada. So I applied for a working holiday visa in 2017.
After a few months stint working in London to make a bit of money for her travels, Nicola's 12-month visa was approved. And then, in early March 2019, Nicola came to Canada.
Actually, it's really funny how I picked Toronto. I just looked to some fight searcher, and it just popped. I knew that I would like to end up in Vancouver, but before I said, okay, maybe why don't to start in Toronto.
Nicola usually stays in hostels when she travels. It's an easy way to meet like-minded people. So she checks into one in Toronto and pays for 2 weeks up front. The hostel is run by a Ukrainian woman. There's a Turkish man in his mid-40s, an Irish woman in her late 20s, and a college-aged American guy staying there when Nicola arrives.
I don't know if there was someone else, but there was Mark definitely. He was like shining, smiling to everybody, very charming. I don't know, like he was confident with himself.
I don't think we've met yet. Did you just get in?
I came here early this morning.
I'm Mark. Nice to meet you. Where are you from?
Nicola, I'm from Czech Republic.
What brings you to Canada?
I am gonna do some maybe volunteering or like traveling. I'm also needing to find a job or something when I run out of money.
Oh, I can help you on the job front for sure. You're going to love Canada. It's cold, but beautiful. Where else have you been?
Recently I was in Europe. Before I was volunteering in Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia.
No way. I've spent a ton of time in South Asia, mostly in Vietnam. I also volunteer there. It's so important to give back. The world needs more of that. I just got back from Vietnam, actually. I was working as a helicopter pilot there, but took a job here flying people from Toronto to Niagara Falls. It's fine for now, but just temporary because I actually have my own business.
Here's the real Nicola.
He showed us video. There's a helicopter landing, and when there was a little close-up, like inside the helicopter, you could see that there was some balded helicopter pilot with the huge headphones, but it could be anybody. But he was like, well, it's me. And you're not expecting that someone is lying to you. So when he said this, I was like, oh yeah, that's him.
Mark, aka Marcel, also told Nicola about his past. A story we've heard before, but with a slight twist. Again, his parents were hippie drug addicts. But this time, he and his sister were taken away from their parents and put into foster care before his parents' untimely death that left them orphans. It was in their foster home that he met his lifelong best friend, Mike Martin. They moved to Vietnam together and joined the army at 19. He also claimed to have an army pension that paid him $5,000 per month, but most of that money was going to his drug addict sister in Toronto, who he wanted to cut off many times, but couldn't bring himself to do. Mark was a big-time smoker, according to Nicola, cigarettes and weed. But he claimed the weed was to help with a back injury he sustained from a bike accident during a trip to India with Mike. After a few days at the hostel, Mark started inquiring more about Nicola's travel plans.
But at that time, I was not sure where I'm gonna go. I was more thinking about the East Coast, like Halifax, just go that way, and then maybe take flight from Halifax to Vancouver and, stay there. But when we was talking with Mark, he was like, don't go to East Coast, there's nothing to see. Go better to the West Coast, like Rockies and everything.
Mark says he's from Vancouver. He shows her pictures of his beautiful house there, his many cars, including the baby blue Aston Martin. But Nicola isn't impressed by this.
I think that he really doesn't care how he get you. He just wants to find a way. So when he was showing me pictures of his house and cars and shit, he knew that I'm not interested in this shit. Then he said, okay, maybe we can travel. And I started to plan more like what I'm gonna do. I decided to rent a car and do the trip. But the deal was that Mark said he was thinking about the same trip as I did, and that, he could join and we could split our expenses. And, I know someone who can help you with the job.
Mark also tells Nicola she can stay at his house in Vancouver until she finds her own place. This all sounds very promising. A travel buddy, someone to split expenses with, a place to stay, and even a job. Nicola is a vegan, and Mark says his friend owns a vegan restaurant where she can work. Plus, Nicola's plan was always to end up in Vancouver. As they begin making plans for their cross-Canada road trip, Nicola needs to get her finances in order.
Before we're gonna go, I need to open a travel account with the bank. Tomorrow I'm gonna go.
Well, you can open an account, but if you want a credit card, that's not going to be easy. Trust me.
What do you mean?
They don't just give credit cards to foreigners. You need someone to vouch for you. Some sort of guarantee that you have a way of paying it back. Usually a job.
No one is telling me about this.
Don't worry. I'll vouch for you. We'll go to the bank together. I'll say you work for my company. We'll do it legit. I'll even draw up a contract.
So they go to the bank together the next day and meet with a bank teller.
So she just asked him what's the name of his company. So he said the name of the company, and she found out, and she said, okay, that's all good. And she opened the bank account for me with 5,000 Canadian dollars credit on it.
Like clockwork, after the visa gets approved, Mark is suddenly strapped for cash. He's waiting on his army pension and pay from his job as a helicopter pilot. He assures Nicola he'll pay her back if she can float some of the costs of the trip.
So you're just not expecting that everybody are bad persons, you know. It's exactly the opposite. I guess it's natural to expect that everybody are nice and everybody are telling the truth. Why? Because I'm saying the truth.
Before they leave, Nicola buys a few things for her and Mark, mostly camping gear. She figures Mark can pay her back when he gets paid, or she can sell his gear at the end of the trip.
He was like, you know, I'm used to have like always some money in my pocket, and now I feel like a crap, and it never happened to me before. So he tried to convince me that he feel guilty for that, and that he gonna make me sure that he gonna pay what he owed me. So, and then we purchased like sleeping bags, like the army, stuffs, because when we were camping, it was like -19. So we needed like good stuff, so it was like a good army stuffs.
They depart for their road trip on a frigid morning in April. Mark urges Nicola to make sure her credit card works before they begin their journey.
So I purchased some grocery. It was around 100, and then I knew that it's working, you know, because the payment went through. And then I didn't really care the whole traveling where the card is. And I think that the normal reaction of the people, if someone is tapping their PIN in, you just look away, you know, but what he probably didn't.
Their drive will take 48 hours total, but they plan to make many stops along the way. The first stretch is a long one, north through Ontario, along Lake Huron and Lake Superior, eventually reaching Thunder Bay before crossing into Manitoba.
When you're on the road, you're mostly listening music, but we didn't really have the same taste for the music. I think that the only match was like a Pink Floyd or something. I was more like, I would say 80s, maybe 70s alternative rock, and maybe like a punk rock and stuff. But he was more like modern stuffs. I don't know, some kind of DJs, and Enrique Iglesias and David Guetta. And I remember one group, Blue October or something like that. He liked the tragically hip.
Nicola does most of the driving and pays for almost everything. She's using the money she saved up from her job in London. For lodging, they do a mix of camping, Airbnbs, and motels. On the road, they talk about everything and anything.
About hockey, about our friends, about Vietnam, about India, about traveling, veganism, politics.
The trip isn't overly planned. Instead, they just look at a map and decide where they want to go next.
Maybe I'd like to visit Winnipeg. It's only 7 hours away.
No, we can't go to Winnipeg. It's way too dangerous. Believe me.
Okay. Maybe we can keep going to a national park on the way or something.
I think we should just keep driving. Let's stop in Saskatchewan.
It's so far though. Maybe we pull over somewhere. We can sleep in the car.
We can't do that. It's illegal to sleep in your car in Canada. We have to keep driving.
Come on, man. I can always say like I was too exhausted, too tired, so I couldn't continue because of the safety of everybody else. I guess that every police officer could understand this, and actually I've done this many times, when I was doing road trips around Europe.
If you're too tired, I'll drive. I don't mind. Believe me, we aren't missing anything in Manitoba.
They drive on to Saskatchewan and end up stopping for almost a week during Easter in Prince Albert National Park, which is in the northern boreal forest. It's picturesque, covered in coniferous trees, mostly pines, spruces, and larches. This time, they do sleep in the car for a few nights. Mark doesn't seem to mind now, but Nicola chalks it up to their secluded location. No one is around. Quite often, Mark is on the phone with his best friend, Mike Martin, who he claims is still in Vietnam. On these calls, he often speaks French or Vietnamese.
But sometimes he walked away, and sometimes it was in front of me. So I actually it was not on the speaker, but I hear that there's some man voice on the other side.
He also speaks to his boss and the property manager for his house in Vancouver. It's currently being rented out on Airbnb. This time, the call is on speakerphone.
And so he was like asking her whether he can use the basement part or something like that. And she said, yes, there are people and they will be leaving like a beginning of May. And we were still on the way to Vancouver. So actually he said, oh, great, beginning of May, it works for us. So he was trying to convince me that we will have place where to stay and I don't have to pay for my staying anywhere else. So it will make me save some money. And it looks like he also wanted to have some time to collect the money and what he owed me, and that's what I thought.
As they make their way to Calgary, Nicola starts to worry about money.
Before I came to Canada, I was in London, so I had like British credit card and I got a Czech one, and I also had the Canadian one, so I kind of knew that I'm okay. But when I started to running out of the money, I was like, man, you will really need to pay me as soon as possible. So he trying to convince me like, I will pay you once we get into Vancouver. I will take the first job my boss will have for me, and I will send you the whole stuff.
When they arrive in Calgary, they have to return their rental car. But they find a great deal on a new one, transporting a car from Calgary to Vancouver.
They just needed to move some cars from point A to point B, so it was like a win-win for both sides.
So they make the 13-hour trek from Calgary to Vancouver.
Well, what happened when we came in to Vancouver was that I stayed at a hostel again, and he said that he's gonna take the car and he will go and take the job his boss offered to him. So we did that. He took the car we had because we still had like a few days left till we needed to drop off. So he disappeared, but we were still in the touch. We were texting.
I'm going to be out of service for a few days. If I don't respond, that's why.
I thought you were still in Vancouver. Are you going to be back in time to return the car?
I am, of course. Don't worry. It's spotty service and I don't have any more data.
Okay, and you will be able to pay me back?
100%. Once I get paid, you'll get every cent.
Here's the real Nicola.
And once he said he's gonna be out of service, I got email from Mike, and Mike was saying that his sister had a car accident in Toronto and she's in a bad condition in a hospital, and if I can pass this information to Mark.
Hello, Nicola. I cannot reach Mark. Can you get in touch with him and pass him this important information? It's a sad thing, but his sister jumped in front of a car, high on drugs, and she's in a bad condition in the hospital.
It's funny because it was still Mark, but what happened, I missed the email. So actually, Mark started texting me like,
Nicola, Mike sent you an email. Why didn't you respond?
I didn't know he emailed. I'm on vacation. I don't care about email.
Something bad happened to my sister. Check your email.
Okay, what are we gonna do?
I need a flight back to Toronto.
Are you gonna do that? You have no money. I'm not going to pay for anything.
I'll ask my boss for an advance.
Here's Nicola again.
So after a couple days, he picked me up at the hostel.
Before they part ways, Mark asks for her debit card. He says he'll deposit money into her checking account. Nicola gives him the card. The account has no money in it, so she figures, what's the harm?
Then I took over driving and I dropped him off at Vancouver International Airport, and that was the last time I saw him.
Nicola takes the rental car back.
So I thought like it will cost me 300 or I don't know, because it was a really good deal, as I told you before, like pick up Calgary, drop off Vancouver. So I did that and they charged me like over 1,000 or something like that. They told me that there was like a limited kilometer range. So we were allowed to do just like the distance between Calgary and Vancouver. So, and then they told me, you overdid it. And I was like, how much? And they said like 1,400 kilometers.
Nicola doesn't know where Mark took the car, but she can't afford the extra charges.
And before this happened, I already paid for 3 nights in Victoria. I knew that I don't want to stay in Vancouver anymore as it was too expensive.
Nicola tries paying for the nights in Victoria with her Czech card. It's declined. She tries again and it does go through, but she finds out she's in the negative. She can't use this card anymore. Her British visa is also maxed out. She figures at least she has the Canadian credit card.
But then I found out that it's more deep because all the 5,000 credit I had on the credit card was gone.
The people at the car rental company take pity on Nicola and pay for her cab to the ferry terminal, but she has no money for the ferry to Victoria. Nicola has to beg strangers for money.
I knew when I get there, I knew that I have like a 3 nights at the hostel in Victoria. So I was good for 3 days. But I didn't really know what I'm gonna do after because I didn't have anything. So then I was starting to, to feel a little bit desperate and like, holy shit, what I going on and what I did wrong. So I just stayed 3 days there. Then I stayed a couple nights on the streets.
Nicola starts to suspect that something isn't right with Mark.
And I was just thinking about all those stuffs and I was like, okay, maybe he's a con man. And then I was like, no, Nicola, don't be paranoid. It cannot be like gang, organized group against you. I was like, Nicola, you're not living in a detective stories.
She reaches out to Mark to check on the status of her money.
I'm sleeping on the streets in Victoria, Mark. I have no money. When will you pay me?
I'm in Toronto. I'm sleeping on a park bench outside of the hospital. My sister is dying. Sad face.
That's horrible. I have nothing to eat.
Can your mom send you money?
No, she can't.
My friend said he deposited $500 into your account. Can we share that money just until I get paid?
I just called the bank. They're putting a hold on the money.
Those bastards.
At the bank, Nicola finds out that the $500 deposit was a blank check that someone tried to withdraw. And just like in Jodi's case, the fraud department at the bank blames her.
It's quite difficult to prove it was not me.
But Nicola is able to prove it wasn't her. She had used her card in Victoria at the same time the blank check was deposited with her debit card in Nanaimo, British Columbia. As far as the maxed out credit card goes, Mark had been using it the whole time they were traveling, racking up charges and making cash withdrawals.
The CIBC fraud department, they were trying to convince me that I gave him the card. And I was like, no, the card was taken from me.
Nicola tries to file a report with the police, but is met with the same disdain as the others.
But when you are like a foreigner, English is your second language and you are newcomer in a total strange country, you just don't feel confident enough to negotiate with officers and police. Like, I'm not the first one, and that I not probably gonna be the last one. It's just funny that when there's no blood, no violence, it doesn't mean it's not a crime. So I think this should be taken seriously. Until today, I don't understand how the Canadian police work. Because they told me at the police station that they got him in the system. So it meant that he did something in British Columbia, but there was no interest to do something about it.
Nicola isn't a very online person, but when she tells her story to her friend Kevin, a Swiss man she met in Victoria, he suggests they search for info on Mark.
We just tapped his name into the Google and the campaign site pops out.
She's talking about Andréa's Stop the March Madness tip line.
I felt desperate at that time. And because police and bank failed, I said, okay, I'm gonna write to Andréa to the campaign. And that was the first people actually finally helpful, because Andréa connected me with Kym, with another victim.
If you remember, Kym lives in Victoria, so she and Nicola meet up the next day.
She wanted to be sure that he's not following me or something, so we did it secretly. Then I told her what happened, and she couldn't believe, but she was glad that I reached out, because always when someone reached out, it means that he's close. So I guess that after a long time, they felt like they might get him or something.
Nicola tells Kym the whole story. At this point, she's still in touch with Mark via text. He says his sister passed away and Mike is heading to Toronto for the funeral, but that they'd come to Victoria to pick her up after. Kym and Nicola try to keep Marcel talking, with hopes of setting a meetup.
But at some point he stopped, because he knew that he will not see any money from me.
Kym loops Jodi in on everything, and they are determined to track him down. He's close by. They can feel it. The two had recently discovered more details about Marcel's previous crimes and open cases, including an open warrant for his arrest in Manitoba, which explains why he was so cautious and didn't want to stop there on the road trip. While Nicola was being conned by Marcel, the campaign to stop him got some media attention. Andréa had reached out to every journalist in the city. Then, the trio are approached by Chatelaine magazine to do a piece about them. With the new information from Nicola, they ask to postpone it as they pursue the lead.
So what we do know about André's MO is that he moves around a lot. It allows him to go to different jurisdictions, different provinces. But as we get more information, as we get more media exposure, we know that he's looking over his shoulder and we know that we're closing in on him. So it may change for him.
He also characteristically gets his victims to buy him something and then flips it on Kijiji.
That's his test. Is she going to buy me something? And do I have her, right? Has she fallen for what I want to do? So
they immediately ask Nicola.
We said, did you buy him anything? And she said, yeah, I bought him a backpack from Mech, a $300 backpack.
So then we had an inkling that he's probably around Nanaimo because the debit card shit happened in Nanaimo.
So then Kym went online and started searching all over Vancouver Island on Kijiji for this backpack. And she found one that was being sold in Nanaimo under the name Mark.
It was the same one, a Fjallraven Abisko 55-liter backpack. The ad says, 9.8 condition, was going to do the West Coast Trail, but plans changed.
So that was on a Wednesday, and she called me. She's like, I think I found them. So she sent me a screenshot of the ad. We reached out through one of my friends, reached out to him, did a fake account on Kijiji and was like, hey, dude, interested in your bag kind of thing. Can you reach out to me? He never responded. So we were kind of like, is he there? Is he not there? But I was just like, you know what? I'm going.
Jodi is dating someone new. He is very supportive of her throughout this whole ordeal. For privacy reasons, we're keeping his name out of the show.
And he's like, if that's what you want to do and you think you're going to find him, then let's go. So Friday afternoon, got in the car, drove down to Vancouver, stayed at my girlfriend's house. And I remember sitting there having, dinner with them, and her husband looked at my guy and said, do you really think you're going to find him? And I remember just kind of like looking at me, and I could see the doubt, but he said, you know what, if Jodi thinks this is worthwhile, then we're going to do it.
Jodi prints out flyers with his face on them. Nanaimo isn't a small city. Roughly 90,000 people live there. But she knows a lot about Marcel now, including where he stays and places he frequents.
So we got up the next morning and got on the ferry, got off the ferry. We were in Nanaimo by 10 o'clock, parked downtown. We went right to the hostel because that would be my first stop. I walked into the hostel and I said, do you recognize this guy? He's like, yep, I recognize him. He pulled up his name in the computer. He's like, I recognize him, but he's not staying here. I'm like, okay. So then we went to the cannabis store. And the girl in there, she's like, does he have an accent? I said, yeah, a French accent. She's like, I think he's trying to date the girl that works here, the other girl that works here. So we're like, okay, is she around? And she's like, okay, she's in later today. So we're like, okay, we'll come back.
Next stop, Tim Hortons, of course. Marcel's stomping ground.
So then we walked up to Tim Hortons, showed the manager his picture, and he's like, I don't recognize him, but let me get one of the morning girls and see if she recognizes. So this little Filipino lady came out from the back, and I showed her, and she's like, oh, yeah, he was here this morning. And I just looked at my guy, and I'm just like, he's here. I knew it. He's here.
In the meantime, Kym is on her way up from Victoria to meet them. Kym and Jodi haven't met yet in person.
So Victoria is about 2.5 hours from Nanaimo. I was excited to meet her finally. We had just grown so close to each other, like through this whole ordeal and talking all the time on the phone. So as she was driving up, we're already in the process of, okay, let's start digging and try to find this guy.
Jodi and her partner's next stop is the library. Jodi knew him to frequent libraries to, quote, work or use their internet.
So we went to the library. I walked around hoping that he would be there. No sign of him. Went to the counter, asked them if we could put up a poster. They were like, nope. They were horrible to deal with. They were just like, nope, we're not telling you nothing. We're not giving you any help, nothing. Get out of here kind of thing.
They leave feeling dejected. They already visited 3 prime locations, but no sighting yet.
So we walked out of there, and there was this young homeless guy sitting outside the library. And went up to him and gave him $20 and said, you know what, go get a good meal. Then I came out of the library and he's like, oh, by the way, do you recognize this guy? And I handed the kid a flyer. And he's like, oh yeah, that's Mark. And I'm like, bingo.
Jodi asks the man where Mark hangs out.
And he's like, oh, he hangs out a lot at the soup kitchen. And we're like, okay, where's the soup kitchen? We'll go there now. It's almost lunchtime. And he's like, oh, it's just up a block up from the Salvation Army. And we're like, okay, yeah, we saw the Salvation Army when we drove in. We know exactly where it is. Thanks so much. Go get a good meal and have a good day.
As they're walking down to the soup kitchen, they pass by the Salvation Army.
And we both looked at each other and we're like, we should go into the Salvation Army and give them a flyer. So we walked across the street. As I opened up the door, it was like you walked into like a fishbowl kind of thing. It was all glassed in. And then there was like a reception that you could talk through the window at the reception. And then there was a door. They automatically open, like they control that door. So you're kind of in like a foyer.
Jodi and her partner wait to speak to the receptionist, who's currently occupied.
And I just had this feeling And I turned around and I saw him, and he was behind the glass and he was coming out. I had on a baseball cap, sunglasses, and I remember him looking at me and just kind of smiling, but he didn't recognize me. So then he comes out the door, and I just moved right over and I got right in front of him, and I looked at him and I'm like, "Hey, Dre." And he was just like, "Oh my God." He's like, "What?" I'm like, "Gotcha, motherfucker." And then I took my sunglasses off and I'm like, "How you doing, Dre?" He's like, Oh, I'm in rehab.
Marcel suggests they go outside to talk.
And I'm just like, "Where's my money? Where's my $45,000? He's like, "Yeah, I know, I owe you money. I was so high on drugs at the time. I don't remember anything. And I'm in rehab now." He had his sunglasses on. He had a baseball cap, his sunglasses on, same as me, which is ironic. But I think I asked him probably 6 times to take his sunglasses off. And then I got firm with him, and I'm like, "Take your sunglasses off." And he's like, "Why?" I said, "Because I want to look you in the eye." And he did. He took them off, put them on top of his hat, and he looked at me, and I saw fear.
Then Jodi's partner reaches for Marcel's shirt and says, "Let's see your money belt. Let's see if you have any money on you right now."
And he was like, "What? I don't have a money belt." And then he looked over at the reception, and he's like, buzz me back in. And he turned, and he was panicked. He was just like, it was, in the moment, it was like the most exhilarating feeling ever to just be like, "You know what? You are findable. So he buzzed back in. People there, security came out right away. They were like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "Call 911. This guy's a con man. He's a fraudster. I got the proof. Just call 911.
This is the real audio of the interaction from Jodi's cell phone.
Hi, Greg. We got Kym coming up with the 2 fucking guys.
Can you call the cops, please? This guy's wanted all across Canada. I have the proof. He's wanted all across Canada. For forgery, fraud, theft, everything. He is wanted.
The security at the Salvation Army refuse to intervene. They say it doesn't involve them. So Jodi calls the police herself.
So I'm on the phone calling 911. They're like, "Is there a file? Is there like an active warrant?" I'm like, "No, there's not an active warrant in BC, but he's got warrants all across Canada. Like, get your ass over here. We found him. I'll pay to fly him to Manitoba. I don't care. Just get over here. Get an officer over here. We've got him cornered in here." I mean, you have no idea how hard it was to even get them to send an officer. It was so hard. I was begging with them. And while I'm on the phone with 911, I have a binder like this thick of information. I'm like, "Go back to the car, get the binder, so that when the police get here, I can just show them the binder."
Finally, an officer does show up, but he says he can't do anything without a warrant.
He's like, "I can see you got an active open file, but I don't have a warrant." And I'm like, "Go in, grab him. You know what? Give me 5 minutes with him. I just want to talk to him." And he's like, "Oh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can trust you to be alone with him." And no, just go in and talk to him, pull him out here. I want to have a conversation with him. The guy stole $45,000 from me. I want to talk to him. He's like, "Okay, let me go in and see what I can do."
The officer tells Jodi he'll get on the radio to see if they can get his warrant in Manitoba extradited to BC, or at the very least, see if they can pick him up for questioning.
So we're standing in the foyer, waiting. He goes in, he talks to security, comes back out, and he's like, he jumped out a window at the 2nd floor. Yeah, and I just looked at the cop and I said, "Well, does an honest man run?" And then he's like, "I'll drive around for a bit, see if I can find them." And I just looked at him and I said, "Yeah, and we're going to do the same." And we drove around for hours.
By the time Kym arrives in Nanaimo, Marcel is in the wind. Jodi is infuriated with the lack of movement on her case. It's what's allowed Marcel to escape.
They haven't done the work to get my warrant. My file is still open. My file is still active, but they have not gone to the courts to get the warrant. They haven't done the work. They've just sat on the file. They have not done anything. They haven't even gone to the bank yet to get the production orders, to get the information from the bank. They just don't care.
There are also problems with the legal system that allow people like Marcel to evade justice. Here's Kym's take on that situation.
He knows that there's loopholes within the police force. He knows that there's not a collaboration from province to province. He knows the laws enough that if he gets charged with fraud, he's probably only going to get 6 months and a slap on the hand. He knows that most people are going to feel blame and shame, and they're not going to come forward. And also that the police look at it as like a petty kind of situation, especially if it's only 5,000 or 10,000. It's not on their radar.
There's no Canada-wide warrant for Marcel's arrest, and despite multiple active warrants in Quebec and Manitoba, he can move around freely in other provinces. No one is looking at the totality of his crimes across the country.
That's how he gets away with it. He knows the system. When we went through those bank record or the phone records, there were phone calls to banks, security firms, Border Patrol, Canada Customs, everything. So he is constantly checking up and seeing, okay, has my warrant been extended? Can I go here? Can I go there? That's what he's doing.
What they need is a Canada-wide warrant, a type of warrant that is reserved for, quote, serious cases, and one that can only be ordered by the judge of a superior court or appellate court. Despite their frustration with the police so far, Kym and Jodi are determined to push for it. The question is, will the police actually cooperate and take their case seriously?
The big thing is it just takes one person. This one person to say, you know what, we're going to do what we got to do. I remember going into the one of the police station meetings and saying, you know, like, I want to press charge for deception rate. And they laughed at me. I'm like, it's a thing in the States. And they're like, it's not here. I'm like, it needs to be. Because I would never have had an intimate relationship with this man if I'd known who he was. He completely deceived me and took advantage of me. And that's huge. Rape by deception. Rape by deception.
For Jodi, the nightmare and financial burden of her time with Marcel continues to haunt her.
It's hard, like the end of the month, and I know I got to pay those bills, and it's like I relive it every month. I go dark for 2 days every month, and I hate doing it. I dissociate, I go dark, and I'm just like, I got to just let me deal with this. And then within a couple of days, I'm back, and I'm like, okay, let's get through another month. And it's just killing me.
A few months later, after what happened in Nanaimo, and with Jodi's relentless pressure on the RCMP, a constable takes ownership over her case. He promises to work solely on her file. For the first time in over a year, Jodi feels optimistic about the future. The Chatelaine magazine article also gets published, bringing national attention to the case. The women get a lot of support after coming forward, but they also receive a lot of vitriol, especially online.
You can't blame others for stupid mistakes. It's a cruel world out there.
He's successful because he tells these ladies how much money he has. They'd never go for him if he told them he drives a cab or is a janitor.
How do people keep falling for these scam artists? There's so much in the news about it. Crazy.
So how do I know this isn't just some bitter exes who threw this together? It says he takes all this stuff, but that would be theft and he'd be in jail. So what's his fraud? Maybe he has a hard time with commitment.
While all of these comments are hurtful and victim-blaming, one message that Jodi receives really sticks out.
So it was like day after Chatelaine magazine article came out, and I got this message on my Messenger and Facebook. And it just said, how could you be so stupid, you silly, silly woman? And I was like, what the fuck? And then I went out of town to my friends when the article came out because I knew it was just going to be a shit show. And so I was like, I'm taking cover. I'm going to Vancouver and hanging out at my friend's house. And I got there and I'm like, look at this message. It's already started. So there was the profile picture was this guy and this older woman. And I'm like, I recognize that woman. So I went through all my phone because I still had all the messages from Andréa on my phone. I still do. Anyway, I recognized the woman in the picture. So I went through all my files, all my text messages. And I remember one time I had asked André, because he said that he had been raised by his grandparents. And I'm like, oh, she sounds like your grandma sounds like a really sweet lady. Do you have any pictures of her? And he sent me a picture of her. And she was in the picture with the guy.
I said, that is his dad. So I wrote him back and I said, how could you create such a sociopathic asshole, you rat bastard? And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
The women expected some negative backlash, but they hoped more good than bad would come from going public. And with all of the attention from the article, new tips start rolling in.
2 guys came forward from Vietnam that were from Quebec, and they live in Vietnam half the year, and they saw the Chatelaine story in Vietnam. They got taken by him too, and they told Andréa that the Vietnamese mafia were looking for him.
Their investigation is getting stronger and more expansive by the day.
We have found 8 provinces which there's been criminal activity, with some of them with outstanding warrants that are still existing in some of the major cities. We have 4 men and approximately 14 or 15 women spanning over those provinces, including a woman out of Bellingham, Washington as well. I've done the calculation based on the investigation, and I have it just over $1 million. And that's what we know of.
In early fall of 2019, another tip comes through. But this one just doesn't feel right.
Someone came forward on the Stop the March Madness campaign and emailed the campaign and said that she thought that her friend was dating him in Kelowna, BC. And she said that they had met on Match.com. So I went on to Match under an alias and searched for him. I couldn't find him. And in all honesty, I think that he's trying to just play games with us. I think it was him. I'm 100% confident that he's following what we're doing. I have no doubt that he's reading the articles, that he's watching the website. Just as much as we're following him, he's following us.
On the next episode of Catch 'Em If You Can, the case continues to build. But where in the world is Marcel André Vautour?
He's either laying low, he's either found somebody that he's just kind of sponging off of, or he got across the border somehow.
But I think that he is concerned that we're on him and we're going to get him. We're going to get the fucker. And we don't care how we're going to get him. We're going to get him.
So keep running, keep hiding, because I'll find you again and again and again and again, because he is pattern, and we know his pattern. He might go dark for a couple years, and that's fine. Go dark, but I'll find you again.
Okay, so right now he has no idea anybody's on to him, right? Hold on. Yeah, I just see his buddy sent me pictures. Make sure before we get so excited. It's him, 100% him. French Chinese, I think. And he said, oh my God, he took a picture of his ID. His passport. Amazing. It's him, 100% him. Okay, how do we get him?
Catch 'Em If You Can is created and produced by Pink Moon Studio in partnership with Frequency Podcast Network. It's written and reported by me, your host, Amelia King, and Maggie Reed. Evan King is our post-production supervisor. Chris Rennick is our editor. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Catch 'Em Pod.